One thing that's been fairly popular recently among Christian historians, it seems to me, is that we might try to judge the practices of the founders, orthopraxy. Were they doing the things we would expect Christians to do? Were they joining churches, taking communion, not cheating on their wives? Were they attempting to pass legislation in accordance with Christian morality? Now, this is an interesting approach. And oftentimes these Christian historians are pretty critical of the founders. Well, no, they fought an unjust war. They didn't immediately abolish slavery. Such and such cheated on his wife. So we can't say that we had a Christian founding. And yet I find this to be problematic on several levels. Not completely useless, but at least problematic. To begin with, if we want to insist that someone has to adhere perfectly to Christian moral standards in order to be considered a Christian, I don't think there's ever been a Christian. Right? Christians have always recognized that even saints sin. Secondly, I think ironically, since these are mostly historians, it does ignore context. For instance, in 18th century New England, it was very difficult to join a Calvinist church. So you might, in fact, be a very pious believer and yet not join a church. Most egregious, again, particularly for historians, I think it's profoundly unhistorical to judge the specific policies that 18th century Americans passed in light of what seems perfectly clear to us 21st century Americans. Now, I don't think Christian moral teaching or biblical theology is relativistic, but I do think the practical application of it to particular questions can vary from time to time and age to age. And we need to be very careful to say, for instance, as some folks on the left and the right do in Washington, D.C., that if you're a good Christian statesman, you will vote for national health care. And if you don't vote that way, you aren't a good Christian statesman. Or against national health care, or for the Bush tax cuts, or against the Bush tax cuts. I do think Christian morality can have a bearing on those, but I think we need to be very careful judging whether or not someone's a sincere Christian based on their vote. In other words, I think good, sincere followers of Christ could disagree on those policies.